Hey everybody, welcome to Enhance Don't Distract podcast, episode number 49. My co-host Jordan here. No more nicknames, just Jordan. It's better this way, I think. I think he would agree. I'm assuming, right? So, today we've got a pretty good episode in mind here. What are we doing, Jordan? What are we talking about today?
Yeah, we're talking about online church, and there's some research that came out recently about online church attendance and versus in-person church attendance that the Brady and his team on the Pro Church Tools show kind of talked about, and we're going to be responding to some of those, and some interesting findings.
Yeah. So first of all, make sure you hit subscribe. We are over 1,000 subscribers finally. Thank you so much for that. Watch this whole video if you can. Just throw it on repeat. Just watch it over and over and over.
Like overnight. Yeah.
Yeah. It gets us that consumption time. It's great. Make sure you comment down below. Tell us what you feel about the conversation here. I just wanted to kind of say this because this is the second or third time. I mean, I've had Brady on the show here, and me and Sean have reviewed one of his other videos. He talks a lot about the things that we do, right? He's more of the philosophy behind the gear and the thought process and how to do it. And so, that's why we kind of continue to watch him. There's a handful of guys that we watch. But yeah, he is probably by far one of the most influential in my life when it comes to online stuff. And I know that that's kind of like a really big hot topic right now. So that's kind of why we're bringing this up. And I saw this. I do want to preface this. I was not a real big fan of the rest of this podcast. There's a couple topics that they talk about in this. The first topic was the only one that I actually liked. The other ones, I will say, I wasn't super enthused with. So I just want to preface that just because I feel that they say some things that I disagree with in the other part of it. So if you do go and watch the whole thing, just know that we don't, or at least I don't fully agree with the rest of the things that they said.
Yeah. And we're really just talking about, we're just mainly interested in the online church part and the first 15 minutes or so.
The first 15 minutes of the podcast. So
do we want to start with prayer really quick or?
Oh, yes, we do. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to do that first?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, great.
Heavenly Father, just thank you for this time together. Thank you for this topic. Thank you for the way that you're shaping your church and your bride. Just pray that those that are watching and listening are edified, encouraged, maybe even challenged with some of the things we talk about. We do these things in your name. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Do you want to just dive in then?
Yeah.
All right. Let me add here. And then...
he's pulling it up.
Benefit from and appreciate. And the biggest one that stood out to me over the last couple of months since we had you on the show was titled, Who is Attending Online Church? Where you basically summarized, hey, Pew asked 11,000 plus people in November of 2022, which was an important date because it was after, near the tail end of COVID, asked all those people a variety of questions about their worship attendance, both in person and virtual. And I was very surprised by some of the takeaways, because what pastors want to know is this: are there a bunch of people that are only watching online church and they're not coming in person? Yes or no?
No, that's actually probably the biggest takeaway is there's I hear when I go do church things, the people will ask me, that's one of the top 5 questions is, what do we do about online church? And for a long time, I just didn't have a good empirical answer to that question, because I know what happened is a lot of them weren't doing online church. Then COVID happened, and then they started doing online church, and then they just kept doing online church because they saw people logging into the website and saw the click.
So what were you saying?
Ryan's obviously been out in the sun a little bit. It's summertime.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Some shade.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube and Facebook, and they're like, well, I guess we'll keep doing it and then they're like, well, how do we build community in this online congregation? And I didn't really know what to tell them because I didn't know how big that number was. But the share of Americans who are honest to goodness, online only, they attend in person less than once a month, but attend nearly every week online, is about 5% of Americans.
All right, let's pause right there.
Yeah.
5% of Americans, recap that. Can you break that down?
Yeah. So they are looking at the study, and they are saying 5% of Americans attend an online church exclusively every week.
Yeah.
So 5% are going online only. They're not going in person, and they're going every week.
I think that number right there. I'm glad that this was the first number that they threw out and that they started this with this.
Yep.
Because you would think that the sky was falling with how much people think that everyone is just like sitting at home in their PJs eating donuts watching online church instead of coming in and shaking hands and taking communion with us.
Yep.
So
nope, that's true. I mean, yeah, getting it right out of the gate, like those. I don't even know. We should come up with like different names for these people, but like the guys and gals that are only online tuning into your church every week, it's 5%. How much are you?
We should come up with names and give them technical names.
Technical names.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have to.
We'll be thinking about that.
Maybe we'll make a short. We'll make a couple shorts for the channel, and we'll throw the proper names that we're going to start using for them there.
Mm-hmm. The 5%ers.
Yeah. I think this is kind of interesting, right? Entire sample, Protestant, Catholic, right? Monthly. Let's see. So what's the relationship between in-person and online attendance? So
yeah,
you're watching online. Yeah, dude. This is pretty crazy. I mean, honestly, even like yearly, monthly and weekly.
Yep.
Yeah. Protestants obviously higher. That's pretty interesting. So
yeah, it's interesting too that they did look at Catholics and Protestants, because I have a bit of experience with both, and
I guess I'm actually struggling to understand this graph a little bit.
I will say that too. I did find these graphs a little bit tricky to read. So I think you have people that go online there on the left, but then people that tune in online. On the left, it's weekly.
Oh, okay. So this is the watching online. Okay. So are these the people that go in person, or these are the people that actually watch online? Because like that says to me like 6% never watch online, and 18% seldomly watch online. 27% watch at least something yearly. 46% watch monthly. 46% also say weekly. And then more than weekly is 57%. That seems kind of crazy.
Yeah. I also will say I don't know if these slides are directly to what they're talking about.
Oh, he's got it branded on the bottom for him.
Yeah, he does. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's okay. But I guess let's go back and hear what they have to say. And
yeah.
Which is not nothing, of course. 5% of people is a lot of people in some ways, but it's not that many people in the grand scheme of all religion. So, and you also, the one thing I couldn't get into is like, what do you watch? I'm going to venture to guess that a lot of them watch a handful of different, religious, like the big ones, like Steve Furtick at Elevation or Saddleback or something like that. How many people actually are committed to a small church with 75 people, 100 people, but only do it online?
So I would like to point that out, right? Because this is where I feel like, like statistics can kind of within reason say anything you want it to say, right?
Statistically speaking, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you can kind of get that, like whatever answer you want from statistics, right?
Yeah.
So I want to say that there is a level of caveat to statistics, right? But for instance, when you look at, like he just said, Elevation, Saddleback, the big names, right?
Yeah.
I will consistently watch Elevation every week online. I will watch Bethel, and I will watch, a couple other churches that I really like the pastor for.
Yeah.
So I get lumped into that statistic, even though I go to physical in-person church a majority of the time, right? And I will watch my own church online when I, can't be there. So
right. And they're going to talk about that.
Okay.
They're going into
I think
that.
the answer is that many, generally speaking.
Well, that's something I'd be really interested to talk about a little bit later as we talk about the types of folks who are watching online church and what their participation in in-person church is. We're going to get into that in a moment because I know my experience. I am a pastor of a local church, so I attend church weekly in person.
You're not part of the 5%.
No, but if I was part of the folks who
who completed this survey, I would have also checked I attend online church because I consume a lot of online church stuff throughout the week, but it's not a church like mine. So we can talk about that in a moment. But Ryan, I just want you to say conclusively, there has not, or there has been an exodus from the church post-COVID when we introduce all of these online services. Folks have left the church to sit in their pajamas and eat popcorn and watch church online. Contrary to our popular belief, you're saying there has not been an exodus that looks quite like that.
The problem is that the church attendance has been declining for decades anyway. So if it declined between 2020 and 2023 by 2%, is that because of COVID, or was it just going to happen anyway? Because that's what's been going on for 35 years now. Yeah. Everything I've looked at when it comes to COVID in the church tells me that it did not accelerate or decelerate the decline of religious attendance.
All right. So that's huge, right?
Yep.
Like, I think that is a really massive thing, is that it has been, declining since, the 70s, 80s, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really interesting because we also saw the boom of the mega church in like the 90s, right? Yep. Which is kind of an intriguing thought process to like kind of, yeah. But that's huge.
Yeah. And again, what he's saying there too is that, is basically that decline was steady through COVID and this online church boom. Like those did not take a massive drop to church attendance and things like that.
Yeah, like most things in life, right? There's usually a consistent trend, right? Like inflation normally has a consistent trend of going up by a couple percent every year, right? And then you have some blips, like one we're in right now. But yeah, like that, like most things have a trend, and hopefully we can always fight the trend sometimes, for the better. And like you said, like there's not any evidence that even with COVID and all of a sudden 10 million churches being online because of that, that they're sitting eating popcorn. I said donuts, he said popcorn. So
I like both.
Yeah. I don't actually like donuts, so it's kind of a funny.
Yeah, but so another thing we can kind of pull from this though is that online church did not kill in-person church.
Right.
It's unfortunately the church has just been steadily declining.
In-person church killed in-person church.
I think there might be other factors that killed just killing the church, but yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
An oversimplification, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's very interesting. That this idea that online church is negative for your church attendance is going to impact negatively your church attendance, is going to draw people away. That's not true. Like that's what these numbers are saying.
Statistically, not true.
Statistically, yep. And again, this is also one of the things I want to just remind people is that this is a broad stroke data swath. This is, maybe not for your area, so if you're still like, I think bottom line, if you're still seeing good numbers for stream and your community is engaging, like keep going. Like just because these numbers are saying one thing, if you're seeing success, keep going. Like,
yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Is that when we talk statistics, like we're talking about a group of people, right?
Yep.
And of that 10 people in that group, right? If the statistics say that 8 of them, this is pointless. That doesn't mean that the other 2 need to give up on it too, because it's not pointless for them, right? Yep. I think that the way that I view statistics is you have all this data that you have to take in to make judgment calls.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the judgment call of, it doesn't feel like we're getting any traction. It doesn't feel like the resources we're putting into this warrant it. Is it just us, or because like even with us with the podcast here, the YouTube channel, like I remember when I had 500 subscribers and it was like, man, I only have 500 subscribers, I really want more, why is it taking? And then like, what, 500 subscribers, that's a mega church in people, right? And so like that was like I had to take that thought process in to really like push myself to go, 500 subscribers, like that's actually quite a bit. right?
Yep.
It, obviously it's not the 80,000, 100,000, 350 million of, like a
Not
Mr.
yet.
Beast,
Not yet.
right?
Not yet. Yeah.
But like the idea is that 500 people is still a lot, right? And
Yeah,
so like if you're a
absolutely.
church of 75 people, if you were 75 people before COVID and you're still 75 people and you've got 20 people watching online, that's pretty significant.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a quarter of your attendance,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it varies, right? I don't think that I would never take statistics to
never let them
define.
drive the decision making.
Right. Have it be a piece
Yes.
of the information that you use to make a decision.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm totally with you on that. I have that in my notes.
Cool. Yeah. Are you good to keep going?
Yeah, let's roll.
We basically are today where we would have been if COVID would not have happened, or within a very tight tolerance
I jumped a
of
little
what
bit.
2024 would have looked like based on 2020 numbers. If you just shoot a straight line, like I did, I looked at the Episcopal Church because they can do all kinds of cool records like confirmations, baptisms, weddings, things like that. Their 2023 numbers looked exactly what I would have thought they would have looked like if you would have taken their prior 10-year numbers without COVID and projected it forward. So I think we're kind of exactly where we are. I don't think online church has killed in-person church, but I also don't think it's really meeting the needs of lots of new people either. That's actually probably one of the most interesting findings that needs to be thought about a lot more, is the idea that the people who are the most likely to watch church online are actually the people who are going to church in person the most. So weekly in-person church attenders are the most likely people to be watching church on, I call them heavy users of religion, like.
Okay. So I now understand this graph.
I was going to say I do as well.
The first graph is they ask people that are watching online how often you go in person.
Yep.
Right. So the 5% said never, right?
Yeah.
Means that, okay,
Which is really actually 6 in their graph. So
but that totally makes sense now. But that's exactly what I said, right? Like I would consider myself a weekly churchgoer, and I watch online probably, at least
Weekly
another
as well.
4 hours worth of random churches that I enjoy watching.
Yep.
So
the majority of people, just simplifying the data here a little bit, what they're saying, the majority of people watching online are also attending an in-person service.
Right. By, it looks like 57%.
Like 57%. Yep.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah. About half.
Yeah.
So half your viewers online
More
are
than
in
half,
your pews, in your seats on Sunday morning as well.
Yeah.
Or somebody else's.
Yeah. That's good.
They're there. They can't get enough of it, basically. So they go to their own church on Sunday or Saturday or Friday, and then they might watch one of these services on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday, kind of supplement it. So I think we've got a segment who are very, very, very religiously engaged and can't get enough of it. And this is kind of feeding that need. And whether we could talk about whether that's a good thing or not, I don't really have a strong feeling either way. But I think it skews the numbers in some ways, because look at all these people watching online, when maybe 75% of them were already going to church every week in person anyway.
Yeah.
So you're not really adding to the fold. You're just giving these people more of what they want.
You mentioned that 5% number. 5% of
Really
people
quick, can we
said,
pause
yeah,
it for a
I'm
second?
watching.
Yeah.
This is where I would say, is that bad?
Is what
Like,
bad?
is that we're giving people content, whether it's in our church or in another community church, like, is it bad that we're putting our content out? And that's where I'm like, no, like if people are engaging with our content, our stream, our services, like let them, like keep it going. That's where I'm kind of like, I'll show my hand here a little bit. That's where I'm in favor of online church, because it's like, if people are consuming it, just let them keep consuming it. They're here in church on Sunday, but they're also engaging online during the week. That's a good thing. We want them to engage with church.
Yeah, I think that statistically, I think I would ask more questions, right? Like for instance, like my church, like when I was running the live stream there, I would watch the graphs, right? Because I'd be curious to know
viewers and stuff.
Yeah, like what's my average duration of viewership, right? Because we're just over an hour to an hour and a half sometimes for our services, like from start to completion, right? And the average duration of viewership for us was averaged about 33 minutes. Now, those graphs are a little bit more complicated because it's like, are people tuning in to watch worship and then they leave, or are they...
A lot of people tuning in just for the sermon.
Right. Or are people just tuning in for the sermon? I would assume it's more for the sermon because, like, our church starts at 10 o'clock. Oh, I woke up a little late. Right. And it's like I missed the first 2 songs worth of worship. So I watched the second half of worship, and then I watched, the first 3/4 of the message. And then it was like, oh, I got to go. Right. Because people that are watching online tend to be a little bit more like, chances are higher that they have something that they need to do, which is why they're watching online. So you might not get the whole thing right.
Absolutely.
So that's where it's like, in my head, does this content again, like, let's hold this thought because I've shared with you what my thought was. So I want to be able to, I want to like dive into that a little bit more.
Okay.
And I think they mention it later here.
Okay.
So let's just pause my thought there.
Church online, I'm not attending in person. I am not the numerologist. Is that a thing? What is your title, Ryan?
Statistician, I suppose.
There you go.
That was what I was going for.
Numerologist is like, oh, I saw 11:11 on the clock. What does that mean?
Okay, I am not the statistician. So far away from the statistician, couldn't even think of the name, the title. Is 5% in a data set considered like, oh, that's notable? Or is that like, really small and probably not worth paying too much attention to?
That's the hard thing about numbers is everyone matters, but we only think about numbers in the aggregate. Like when I was in grad school, we read this book called Suicide by Emil Durkheim. It's the very first piece that was ever quantitative piece about religion, trying to figure out what caused people to commit suicide. And he actually went to morgues around Paris and got the death records. And they used to put things like religion on your death record. So he tried to figure out if religion makes you more or less likely to commit suicide. And he actually found, by the way, that Protestants commit suicide at higher rates than Catholics do, because Protestantism is a more individualized religion and Catholicism is more group religion. And social ties are what keeps you from, killing yourself.
That's
at least
pretty key there.
in France in 1880, so is that. But what's interesting is when we had that discussion in our grad class, one person goes, yeah, but doesn't this kind of like dehumanize people? Like we're talking about individuals who took their own life, and we're talking about them almost like in this crass, aggregate way. And my professor, Scott McCarty, who just passed away, actually said, he goes, do we care about why Bob killed himself? Yes, but we care a lot more about why people like Bob killed themselves. And so I think that helps us understand like both things matter, but as social scientists, we have to talk about things that top level stuff. And 5% of people is not nothing, but also it's like, I can't imagine trying to like gear your entire religious community towards an online space. It just doesn't seem like that's a need that's large enough. Talk about total addressable market when you go to like do venture capitalist stuff. How many people would buy your stuff? And the answer in this case is not too terribly many to want to like invest millions of dollars and hundreds of hours to try to like bolster your online web presence. I think is really not a tremendous use of your time.
Yeah, and you know what? That is reassuring, tracks with what we have said so many times on this show over the years. People asked us, hey, like, do you see a future for like online church as an exclusive, right? Like, I don't know, it seems kind of counterintuitive, backwards to what the church is best at. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the people that are both watching online and attending in person. And I would share your hypothesis, Ryan, that, hey, the people that are watching online and attending in person, they're probably supplementing their in-person with like other church services, most likely the more influential churches and pastors. Would you say that we can glean anything from this data in terms of preference? You talked about like this market and how much people care about this sort of thing. Do people like online church more than in person?
No, that's actually probably one of the findings that bubbles up the most is when you looked at people who did at least once a month for both. So, they had experience in the online space and the face-to-face space. If you break it down by age, the people who are the most likely to like online are 18 to 29-year-olds, but only 1 in 5 of them said they preferred online, while 2/3 of them said they preferred in person. So even amongst the youngest Americans, 2/3 and 15% didn't have a preference. So
that's massive.
Yep.
I think that graphic right there is the graphic that I would stand on.
Yep.
So I will bring in my point. I think now would be the time to bring in my point, right?
Yeah, let's talk it.
So, and I think they kind of talk about this a little bit here, a little bit more later too, in this part of this conversation. But this graph brings me to a thought process of, and you made the comment earlier, right? Is like people watching our content online, right? It's good. I don't have a problem with our content online. What I was saying earlier is that if people are not really caring about my worship, and when I say not caring about my worship, is I think that it's like the quality of live music on a YouTube video is not the same as going and seeing any of these worship bands at whatever level of quality they are,
or just any live music. I mean, that's why concerts are still
exactly
massively successful.
Now you add in someone who isn't mixing it for online, right? They're mixing it for the room, which very well could be tuned very poorly, could be not great speakers, could have no acoustic treatment. So there's lots of reverb, extra things like that, right? That will translate hardcore poorly to your online service.
Yeah, absolutely.
I, again, don't disagree with you that I think that putting content online is important. But I think that at what level that gets done, I think is the next question that I ask. And then I also ask the same question that I've had on this channel of why is the church not on YouTube making YouTube style content? Because like a live stream of a Sunday morning service is not YouTube style content. That's broadcast television, like you're watching the Grammys, like, type of content. And
live events.
Yeah, like this type of shot, right? I'm in a nice microphone. It's, it's intimate. Like me and you almost feel like we're sitting across from each other at a coffee house, talking. Like those are the type of YouTubers that made the platform what it is, right? The vloggers, like the unscripted, untethered, like why are we not making more content like that when 90% of us have one of these in our hand?
Yep.
And I've made that argument and I will continue to make that argument. And this right here shows me that I think my argument is valid. Right. And so I think where my head goes, and I think they're about to say this, is like, I would rather have live streams just hardcore dumbed down.
Yeah.
And I would rather see, I mean, and you've been a part of this, right? Because we do installations for the business.
Yep.
The cheapest installation that I think I've done on camera setups is like $15,000, right?
Yep.
And it just goes up from there. I mean, I've done $100,000 camera installs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right? Yep.
And obviously most of the churches that, shouldn't be live streaming to this extent aren't spending $100,000, but I've done some like $30,000-$40,000 installs for churches that I'm like, your online presence does not warrant this much money. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think that I don't want to say online is bad or you shouldn't do it, but I will say,
I don't think anybody's saying that.
No, I think that where's your dollars and cents going is important.
The priority.
And your foundational pieces are important, right?
Yep.
Like you can have the coolest car in the world, but if you have to replace the transmission in it every 6 weeks because it blows up constantly, that's a problem, right? And that car's not cool, right?
Right.
And so my thing is that what this data is showing me is that so many people prefer in person versus online, that I would say I would rather see, and like I said, I think they're about to say this, I'd rather see like a $700 camera plugged into a $700 web presenter on the back of the room with a matrix feed for audio dumped into it, so that we're online for the people that are sick or traveling or whatever, or people that want to see what our church is about.
Yeah.
Right. And then take the other, $13,000 and invest that into better sound system in the room, better soundboard in the room, better lights in the room, training for our volunteers, so on and so forth. Like the list of things that need money in the church is endless when you start to think of it like that. And I think that would be my argument for a lot of this is like, stop spending so much money on something that isn't really doing much for you. I'm not saying stop doing it altogether, but maybe rein it in a little bit. Are you frozen? Uh-oh. You're frozen. Hey, there you are. You're back.
Yeah.
You were not saying anything. I'm like, I think you're frozen. Could you hear me?
Nope.
No? Okay. What was the last thing you heard from me?
I think it was something about like, I'd rather see churches put something into their, and then I was like, yeah, he's really teasing this one out. Like, wait, no.
You were like this.
And like, now that'll be the thumbnail for this video.
I'm like, he's either frozen or just really thinking here. What I was saying is like, I'd rather see them invest that money into, in-person things, right? Nicer carpet, better sound system, training for volunteers, taking people out, to lunch and connecting with them on a personal level, more community events, right? It's like, I can think of like $12,000, $13,000 worth of money can go a pretty long way in a church of like 100 people. Like that's a lot of, that's a lot of dough,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know $13,000 seems like a lot, and people go, "Oh, that's crazy." Well, it's like when you're talking about like 2 or 3 PTZ cameras that are $2,000 a piece, that's $6,000 just for the camera.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Another $2,000, that's $8,000 for 3 cameras and a controller.
Yeah.
Right. Another $1,000 for a computer. Right. So now we're $9,000, not including the cable, not including any labor, because you're most likely going to pay someone who knows how to install it. Yep. Right. And, and then you have an ATEM. Like that number grows pretty quickly.
Yep.
On a really low level like spectrum even. So I think that's where my head kind of goes. And I think that, like I said, I think they talk about a little bit more here about, those people that are having that thought process because, pre-COVID, my question to clients was always, why are we live streaming? Like, what's the point behind it? Right. Yeah. Because like, if a lot of people were like, oh, well, we have some snowbirds, we have some people that get sick. And it's like, okay, so you're going to have like a maximum of 10 people a year watching your live stream. Well, we shouldn't probably spend $40,000 on it.
Right.
So
what percentage of your congregation is viewing it and maybe using that number to impact budget? So, and that's one of my big things is, when I started thinking about this and after watching this video, is like, what's the role of online church? And for me, it's going back to your why. And every church needs to have this, why you're doing this. And maybe your why is still a valid reason. Yeah. And if it is, keep going. Like nobody's saying stop. I don't even think Brady and team are saying stop. They're just saying, hey, look at this data.
But I will say that your why is going to have levels of what this should look like. And I think that, from my opinion, a lot of people have a hard time with that, right? Yeah. I have the why. That's why it's valid that I'm spending whatever it is that I'm spending. Yeah. Right. And it's like, well, no, but your why doesn't validate you spending, $40,000 for 6 people to watch your live stream.
Yeah. Well, and especially tech guys and gals, right? I mean, let's just be honest.
Toys.
We like gear. We like to have the nice stuff, but and some of that I understand why you do. I get it. I've been there myself. But that's where I'm like, man, does the cost and the gear fit the need and the why? Like, is there a match there? Or is it like, wow, you have a tremendous amount of gear for a low need, low why? Like that mismatch is,
I look at it like this. This is the approach that I took and I still take. Mm-hmm. And I think that everyone should take this approach. I'm confident enough to say this.
Okay.
If this was your money and you had to buy this to accomplish your personal mission, would you buy what you're talking about?
Yep.
Because I know for me, when I'm talking, or like right now, like on a non-tech level,
Right.
me and my wife, I bought a riding lawnmower at the beginning of the season for $600.
Dude, I was thinking lawnmowers as well.
Bro, bought it used, right? $600, right? It blew up on me last week.
Yep.
Okay. And now I've got to take it in and see if I can get it
Me as
repaired.
well.
Right?
Yeah.
If I can get it repaired, right? Well, what's that
Yep.
going to take? I don't know. Is that going to take $300? Is that going to take $700? Right?
Yep.
And my wife says to me, man, if it's going to take $600-700 to repair this, or we have to buy a new one for $600 or $700, yeah, it really sucks. We'll be $1,300 in when there was a brand new one at Home Depot for $1,800.
Right.
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 And so like this idea of like, I can't afford $3,000 worth of lawnmower. Right.
Yep.
But what I see a lot of church tech people go is, we need the $3,000 lawnmower. Let's buy the $3,000 lawnmower, when they
Yep.
could have done the $1,800 lawnmower and been accomplishing the exact same goal.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked about lawn size.
Exactly.
You don't need a rider for a 20 by 20.
Right.
I'm sorry.
My eighth of an
sorry.
acre
Yeah.
lawn that I had when I lived in the city doesn't need a riding lawnmower.
Right,
It needs
right.
a push mower. Right. But
Yeah.
my acre that I sit on now needs a riding lawnmower.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right
That's-
sizing.
That's my thought process, right? Is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when the large church that I worked at, that me and you both worked at,
Yeah.
the youth room had a bunch of tube TVs hanging from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was built in 1999. That's just what existed, right?
Yep. And it was a
And-
large open room. Yep.
In a giant open room, holds like 2,000 people, right?
Yep.
They used to do big concerts, Skillet, Reliant K, you name it, they've been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the video system started to fail in, I think, 2012, 2013. And so we were like, we presented the idea of, hey, let's revamp this. Let's run everything in SDI. Let's get flat screens. Let's
Yeah.
reconfigure this, right? The church said, great. Yeah, let's figure it out. How much is it going to cost? So we come up with this plan. Okay. I bought the TVs from Best Buy, right? I go into Best Buy and I knew how many TVs I needed, right? Because we landed the plane on, this is the design. This is where I want to put TVs. This is the size TV I want, right? And they said, great. They're like, what TVs do you want to buy? And I said, I'm not sure. I'm going to go into Best Buy. I'm going to figure this out. So I go into Best Buy and I say to the guy from Best Buy, I say, hey, I have a purchase. I didn't tell him how many TVs. I didn't tell him how big of a purchase. I said, I have a purchase. And I said, and your answer will depend on whether I buy them from you or someone else. And he said, all right, cool, let's do this. And I said, if I said I needed a 75-inch TV, I think a 65-inch TV. If I needed a 65-inch TV, which one would you suggest to me? And he looks at the wall, because the thing was like plasma was still a thing then.
Okay.
Like it was starting to phase out, but like you could tell that they had all the plasmas a little bit brighter on the wall, right? Because that's that's a tactic that they use. And I knew that I was not going to be buying plasma. And if this guy told me to buy this plasma TV, I was going to just go away.
He's putting his salesman hat on.
And he goes, hey, he's like, I think that this is where I would live, right? I would say that you would be really happy in either this Samsung, LG, or this, I don't even remember what the other brand was, these LCD 65s. He's like, I think these are great. He's like, there's some other options over here, but he's, and he said the comment of, he's like, you could go with these plasmas, but he's like, they're kind of getting dated already. And he's like, they're not going to be around. You're going to probably want to be replacing them a couple years down the road. He's like, so I would probably stick in the LG or the Samsung realm. Preferably, he's like, just because I think the longevity and the customer support. And the LGs ended up being on sale. So I gave him my sale and I ended up telling him that I needed, I think it was like 15, TVs, which was a big deal for him. Right. So he made a sale of 15 65-inch TVs, because we ended up lumping in a couple other projects. So they're like, if you're going to go to Best Buy and buy a bunch of TVs, just get them for here, get them from here, get them from here. So we did our Holland campus and we did a couple classrooms in the building. So it was like, ended up being like 15 or 18 TVs. But
Buy in bulk.
What?
Buy in bulk.
Buy them in bulk. But yeah, that's the thing. It's now 2024. We're 11 years down the road. Those TVs are still there and still functional.
Yep.
Right. But we didn't just go and buy, the biggest, nicest, most expensive television on the market.
Right.
Right. So We bought what we needed. We bought what fit. Yeah, that's just my opinion. I went in with the mentality of not just going and going, what's the most expensive television out there, right? Let's grab that one because it works. Like I ended up telling him, I'm like, listen, I'm from a church. I'm buying these for a church. And so I'm using God's money, right? Because that money was donated to the church to enhance and push forward the kingdom of God. And so I have been entrusted to be a steward of that, is what scripture says. And so I had to steward that as if I was buying those TVs. And that's the realm that I think we all need to have the mentality and think of when we're doing any sort of purchase for the church.
Yep. Yeah.
You would.
If you've listened to this podcast before, like that's a theme that continues to come up. So this is not a we're getting on a soapbox. Like this is a staple of ours. So
All right, let's finish this up.
2/3 of them said they would rather go in person, and only 20% said they would rather go online. Amongst older people, it's at least 75% of them prefer in-person worship, and 10% prefer online worship. So you get this impression by looking at this data that very, very few people go, man, I could just go to church online the rest of my life, and that's fantastic. It feels like it's better than nothing, but certainly less than the ideal is the impression that you get from the data. There's actually a paper that was just published last year where they looked at psychological distress during the pandemic and in the year after the pandemic. And what they found was the only thing that reduced psychological distress was virtual attendance did nothing for psychological distress. The only thing that did was attending in person at least once a week. So there's no benefit, no psychological benefit to being an online attender. And there was a noticeable, statistically significant psychological benefit to being a face-to-face attender. So like, it's hard to look at all this data and say, yeah, online's fine. I mean, people don't seem to like it that much. It's not that large of a population, and it doesn't produce the same sort of empirical positive things in lives that we would want to see, both as a pastor and as a social scientist, by the way. Like, it's hard to look at this objectively and say, yeah, we should just replace lots of churches with virtual church. I just don't think that's not the way to go for the church. It's not the way to go for society. It's not the way to go for individuals either. This is not a good option. It's like candy. You know, it tastes good right now, but in the end of the day, it's not going to give you the nutrition you need. I think that's pretty clear coming from this data. That's what you're seeing.
For the folks who do attend
remember, online church is a tool, not a replacement.
Online church, according to how your article kind of presents the data, something that your article does is dispel the myth that like, oh, it must be young folks, or like digital natives, as we call them, who prefer to engage with church online. The data, as you present it, seem to say the opposite. Is that it skews towards older folks who are participating in church online more in contrast than younger folks. And I think that kind of gives us a little bit of an insight into as churches, church leaders, as pastors, if we are choosing to do online church, if we look at this data and see, okay, it's mostly older folks who are engaging with this, there are likely reasons, maybe mobility or sickness or whatever, but they still want to be connected to the church. Reverse engineering that should inform what we are doing online as a church. If we can see that, okay, most folks who are engaging with our church online are actually older, and it's probably because of mobility or something like that, how can we cater this experience to them? Because looking at the data, it seems to be that's who is really needing this service from our church.
Yeah. About 70% of your virtual only attenders are 50 years and older. Right. So they make up a vast oversample of your online church attenders. Educationally, it's people with a high school diploma or less make up a disproportionate amount. And what is even probably more interesting is African Americans are overrepresented in that virtual only crowd compared to other racial groups. So I don't know like what people conceive of in their minds and think of like they're virtual only people, but older, less educated, and then racial minorities are the ones who are consuming the most virtual only content. So, you know, one thing that we have to mention though, like there's an ableist conversation that kind of weaves its way through this larger conversation about virtual church, people who just aren't physically able to get to church. I think that matters a lot, right? Like I think those people need to get something. And it's clear that this is an alternative. It's obviously not the ideal, and I don't think it should be seen as the ideal, but for some people it's good. I think you still got to find a way to bring those people into the social fold of what the church is about. You know, like we can't forget the horizontal dimension of meeting in space with each other. And, you know, the online thing doesn't generate those same benefits. So how do you balance those scales, right? With like wanting to be inclusive to people who can't physically come or maybe are traveling, but also encouraging the people who can be there in person to be there in person as much as they possibly can without turning off the other people. I think that's a very delicate balance to strike. What I've been telling pastors is just think about this idea. There's this idea called friction in the economics literature. Just make something a little bit harder or a little bit easier and people will make different decisions. What if the stream wasn't automatically posted on social media? You had to email someone to get a code or a link to get that stream. If I'm just not going because I'm lazy, I'm going to have, you know, some guilt about that and I won't be emailing someone. But if I'm traveling or I'm sick, then I have no problem emailing and asking for the code or the link to get to that streaming service. So I think you got to think about ways to balance that out, you know, where you meet everyone where they're at without turning anyone off. But also I think you've got to understand that, you know, you're not going to be able to compete. The average church is not going to be able to compete with Elevation or Saddleback or, you know, Life Church that's spending literally millions of dollars on their online component.
Yeah.
A lot of people are flocking to that because it's so slick. You know, what is your niche if it's not slick? You got to find something else. And I don't think a lot of smaller churches really have enough manpower and money to kind of find a niche that makes, you know, any sense to them.
For about 10 years, Ryan,
I think that those are all major great points.
Yep.
You know, that friction, right? I think I would love to see people experiment with that, right? Because like the idea of like the people, when you say, hey, who is this live stream for? And they're like, oh, it's for our elderly people. Great. If they are, because they are traveling, they really want to be a part of this. And that's what it's for.
Yeah.
Having that, we'll send you the link. It's a private link, right? We'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't want it to be out there for everyone because, you know, we don't really have enough money to like really make it look good, right? And we want to represent ourselves and everything really well, but we want to give you the capability of being a part of what we're doing when you are in Florida instead of Michigan or Arizona instead of Virginia, right? Or you're traveling, you know, for work or whatever, or you're sick, right? I like that idea because like you said, if you're not there because you have legitimate reasons to not be there, you're not going to be embarrassed. And that friction, like you want that, right? So like you're okay with that extra friction. If you're not there because of, you know, you're being lazy, then you're not going to get it. And it's like, that's where people get a little squirmy and say, oh, well, I still want to reach that person. Well, I do too. But like, you think that they're just not going to go and find another church? It's not like they're just going to say, screw this, I'm out of here. I'm never going to worship Jesus again. Like, I really have a hard time believing that because your church doesn't live stream that you're going to, you know, turn people, you know, to the other side.
Yeah. No. And I mean, yeah, maybe I'm an optimist, but it's also like, I think that's how God works. Like, he's going to provide another way, right? If it's all depending on me or some church, like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Interesting. I think God always makes a way.
We take on that burden of salvation.
Yep.
And it's not us.
Yep.
Oh man, that's a good point. I don't know why I've never really thought of that. Like all those arguments of like we have to be online because we want to read. It's all about one person. It's all about one person.
Right. And no, but not them. The one person is us.
Yeah.
It's we have to do it, otherwise we fail. What? You think God? Again, this is where we're thinking of ourselves very elevated. You think we're like this keystone for God's plan?
Yeah. She's good. Yeah.
You need to get back on the word. He's got backup people. He's got people that'll take over.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's powerful.
So
yeah.
Release that from yourselves. You know, you missed a mic cue. It's not the end of the world.
Dude, I mean, that's for the pastor that just listened to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You missed sharing your testimony with somebody. Like, yeah, okay, next time get it around, but it's not the end of the world. God's going to find somebody else.
Yeah, be a little bit more bold, be a little bit more prepared, right? Like I get all those things. We're not saying don't do those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I thought the psychological impact was an interesting thing. I mean, again, time and time again, it's just the church. I think if I just have come around to, I think churches just need to prioritize the in-person.
We were made to be in community.
In the community part. I really do. I actually said this to somebody earlier this week is I think if churches really honed in on that, and especially right now, we could actually see a tremendous church growth. Like if you were like dead set on community, intentionality, and authenticity, I think that's what people really want right now. So,
Yeah. All right, we got a couple more minutes of this and then we're done.
Yep.
We have been quite vocal about our belief that live streaming is tremendously overvalued in the church space relative to its outcomes and what it contributes to local churches and the spiritual growth of the parishioners. And so this is really good data to support our claims. One of the pushbacks that we've got over the years many times has been like, well, what about those that travel? What about those who are bedridden? And what I've always said is like, look, just have a private stream, set up a, real cheap camcorder, put it in the back of the sanctuary, make that available to those that are part of the congregation that are not, but that doesn't need to be like the big front and center thing that you're trying to attract people to your church or introduce your church for the very first time. It's probably not making the best first impression anyway. Take those same resources, invest them into your website, invest them into your social ministry, invest them into one of our favorite things has always been creating a church welcome video that you can post for 3 to 12 months, 12 to 18 months, like however long you'd be. Hey, this is what it's like to attend our church for the very first time. Here's where you park. Here's where you enter through the doors. If you have kids, here's where you take them. Here's what to expect on a Sunday. Here's what a lot of people wear. Here's what, how long service programming goes. Here's where to get connected and volunteer. And now that's a great way of using online to introduce people to in-person, which we know in-person is what makes church special anyway. So it sounds like, put it on the marquee, online church. Ineffective. Nobody wants it. And even the people that do use it don't really like it.
Yeah, that's really the takeaway. Honest to goodness, those are pretty good takeaways. No one, it's sort of like our better than nothing, but no one really likes it. But I do like the idea of a church video. Like when I'm going to go to a new restaurant, first thing I do is Google the menu and figure out, like I'm going to give a talk in upstate New York later this week in the Chautauqua Institution. And like, they were like, well, the dress code is business. And I'm like, wait, is it really business? So I started watching videos from Chautauqua to see what people were wearing in the crowd and then what the speakers are wearing to know what I should wear too. So if you made a video, people were like, oh, this is what people are wearing. I don't want to stand out. This is what to expect when I get there. Like a 90-second video would be incredibly helpful, I think, to lower that barrier of uncertainty they have in their minds and go, okay, at least I know some of what I'm getting myself into. That might be enough for some people to go, well, I was online and now I'll come in person because I know more about the sanctuary and the space and what to expect.
A really lo-fi version of this I saw on a church's website this past week. Their call to action button at the top of their website in the hero section on the homepage was greetings from Pastor Ross. And you clicked this, YouTube video lightbox opens up, and it's just Pastor Ross sitting at a table recorded on what was clearly not like the highest, amazing setup. And it's just him talking to the camera. Hey, I'm the pastor of this church. Here's what to expect. Like, even that is superior at making a good first impression, at introducing people to your church than a live stream in most cases, I would say. Okay, let's...
Yeah, I love that idea. The idea of like this, what comes to mind when they're talking about that is, you've seen those commercials that like states do, like come to California.
Yeah,
like, here we're surfing.
Pure Michigan.
Yeah, like Pure Michigan. The mighty Osabo River, right?
Yeah.
Or come to Florida. We have all these things, right? It's a 30-second clip, right, of like all these different aspects of these states that try and entice you to come and visit them.
Yeah.
Right? Love that idea of like you log on and like that's what you see, right? That I think when you think about like what people are wanting to know, right? You just went through this, right? You just went and looked for a new church, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And when I was doing that, when I was looking for a new church, the things that we looked for were, what does the kids ministry look like?
Yep.
Right. So I'd go to the website, look at kids ministry. What are they about? What are their beliefs, right? What do they believe? Do they believe the same things that I believe, or close enough at least, right? I didn't watch a whole lot of like pastor sermons, right? I didn't listen to really any of their music, right? Because I feel like you don't really get a real good like viewing of that, right?
Yeah.
Now I will say the college ministry at the church that we worked at together, that online blew up because of the time frame that was going on. This was pre-COVID. This is like 2016, 2015, right? There wasn't a whole lot of young college ministries that were doing it. Those were the majority of people that were online. We were in a college town, right? So what we ended up finding was it was actually really hilarious. We found, because we were getting about 50 to 60 people watching online on our Thursday nights, right? We had about 300 people in person for that, right?
Yep.
And so what we found was that our numbers never dipped, whether school was in or school was out. Because what was happening was when school was in, we had all these people from out of town that were going to school in town that were coming to our ministry.
Okay,
And when school got out, they all went home, and all the people that left home came home and came back and were physically in person. And all the people that were physically that all went home are now watching online.
Yep.
They just flip-flopped.
Switcheroo.
It was hilarious because like no one could figure it out. And that was the only thing that made sense when we started asking people. Yeah. And that was what we found.
Yeah. So, I think that's even another big thing too. Is ask your people, like, you know, I know some churches do polls and it's I know, I just think it's very interesting to know the data.
I love church polling. I think that it is. And again, that is not something that dictates what you do. That is another piece of information that goes into your decision making.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And I think that that's what church polling should be, right? A lot of people go, oh, should we do this? Oh, well, it looks like 62% or 51% of the church doesn't want to do it, so we're not going to do it. Right. Well, what about the other 49%, right?
Right.
Was everyone actually, you know, polled, you know, those kind of things, right? Was everyone that polled, did they have all the information, right? That's why you can't hold all of that data as like religious Bible, right? You have to take that as data input to the decision, not the decision.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that this is all really interesting. I love Church Online Ineffective. I think that should be the title of this podcast.
Yeah. It's
is here. I'll throw the word is in. Is Church Online ineffective? Clickbait.
But that's, you know, but again, we're leveraging the network, or we're leveraging the platform. So that's a good one.
Yeah. I think that, you know, for most of these churches that have pastors, you know, like I hate saying, like, because I'm not saying this, right? That they don't have anything going on. Like, you know, they have tons of time. That's not what I'm saying. But I do guarantee you that 90% of pastors in America have enough time to sit down once a week and talk to a camera for 15 to 60 minutes, depending, for online content. And you can accomplish the exact same thing, right? Yeah. I feel like everyone's afraid of online, but feels like they're missing out if they don't. So what happens if you have your pastor sit down and go, hey, I'm going to go over some of the notes that I missed or didn't have time to talk, or, hey, I really felt like, you know, the reaction I got from when I said blank on Sunday meant that more people needed to understand this story in the Bible that I was referring to. Yeah. And they go that, right? And they do that consistently, right? Every week. Hey, I'm going to expound on this. You know, I've got some more points. What is that going to do for you, for the person watching that online? Oh, man, like he's talking about that on Sunday morning? I should go and listen to that because those are great topics. Yeah. And
it makes it more bite-sized.
Yeah, it makes it more bite-sized, right? So now you're getting Sunday morning content. You're also getting this other content that's happening that should be driving, right? Which is a sales funnel, you know, which I know that people get weird about that, but that's exactly what we're doing, right? So it's like we're trying to draw people from one place to another place, right? And we want people in our doors, right? And we also need to be doing other things to do that as well, not just online content. So I think that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think we've said a lot.
Yeah. And I could just keep beating a dead horse if I wanted to. I'm pretty passionate about this. Like, it's so funny. I was so the opposite of this like a couple of years ago. Like, I was so like, no, you all have to be live streaming. You guys are silly if you're not live streaming. And now I'm like, now you're silly if you are live streaming.
And I'm still somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we're closer in our opinion than I think that.
I would also say this. I was shaking my head a little bit of times. Like I also like what is going into these online experience? Like if you're just watching the service, you know, versus like midweek follow up, or you're doing like even like offering like an online small group. Yeah. You know,
I agree.
That's why I like to play around with stuff and just see like, hey, what works, what takes off here, and
so let's go down that path for just a minute because I've got to wrap up too. But like, I think that's another aspect that's not happening, right? I look back to when I used to play online video games all the time, and I had like my clan that I played Halo with, and then we ended up playing Gears of War, right?
Totally.
And this is like mid 2000s. It's been probably 15 years since I've played these games, but this group of guys were so connected. Like we were in text groups, we planned vacations together. We like all like a bunch of them met up in Vegas and went like out there. Some guys went to Florida. There was one of the guys that lived in Alaska that we found out. He was he was a crab fisherman like you see on like the Discovery Channel.
Okay.
And so like he didn't work like 7 months of the year, right? So he's yeah, you guys want to come to Alaska? I'll show you around. So like 5 of the guys went up to Alaska, right? And it was like this crazy like ordeal, right? But that was a community. Like I felt connected to those guys. I thought I looked at those guys like my actual friends that I had never met in person.
Small group. Yeah.
Right. So could you do that online? Yeah, I think you could for those people like that Zoom meetings. Like we did that for our church during COVID, right? We still had our men's group. We had 20 guys on a Zoom call one time, right? Yeah. And does it make it a little bit complicated when you have that many people in a group? Of course it does. But we're not living in 2020 when people are afraid to go outside, right? We can manage that group, right? We can be a part of that. And if you really need that, right? Because there are guys and women that work second shift or third shift or first shift on Sundays and can't be a physical part of in-person church, but still want to be a part of a community and feel like they're part of a community. Yeah. Right. And so I think that there are ways to negate some of that kind of stuff that aren't just a live stream.
Right. Exactly. Where you're using online tools and technology to foster a community via those tools. It wouldn't exist without those tools, but can because of those tools. Yeah, I used to be involved in a tech director at a church in Chicago, and we had a lot of young up-and-coming professionals, and man, they would be there on the weekends, but then they're in DC during the week. They're in Philly. They're in Florida. I mean, like they travel. And I was like, we got all these professionals. Like, can they just jump on a call, like a video call? And this was before video calls were even a thing. Like it was like Skype and a Zoom. Right. But like you're meeting them, you're keeping them plugged in, you're keeping them rooted. So
I think we wrap up with that, man. I think those are all good, valid points, and we should just keep making more content about this as it comes up. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. It really does. When I say this, like I genuinely appreciate and am surprised and honored that you guys have taken the time to actually like listen to me and Jordan just kind of rant and rave about these topics. Comment down below. Let us know what you think about what we've said, what Brady and the team over there have said.
What your experience has been at your church, what your streaming experience like at your church.
Did we change your mind? Did we not change your mind? Did we upset you?
What are you doing with this data? Are you going to go share this with your pastors, your staff, your team?
Yeah. And again, just make sure you smash that subscribe button, comment, share this with a friend, share this with your pastor. I know a lot of times it's hard for pastors to take what you say as a volunteer because, like, what do you know? Or it's the opposite of what they want, so it's hard to hear it from them. And maybe hearing it from an outside source like us will be helpful. So we would love to be able to help you guys with that thought process. So
absolutely.
So thank you so much again. Until next time, I'm Justin. Keep on enhancing.